Welcome to Uncensored Conservatism. This is episode number 130, Project 2025, what's in it? And today we're going to do this in two parts. This is chapter 4, and anyway, here we go. Chapter 4 is about the Defense Department and will be presented in two parts and was written by this guy, Christopher Miller, who served in the Defense Department in Trump's first administration. It lays out four broad priorities and then details how to go about them. The first priority is command accountability, being non-political, and a war-fighting focus. The second priority is maximum effectiveness in war-fighting and manpower concerns. Third, use the Defense Department assets in assisting with border security. And fourth, financial transparency and accountability. The Defense Department has the largest discretionary budget in the federal government, and this fourth priority is one that is rife with the possibility for reform. I mean, everybody wants to rein in the contractors. Now, part of it is their greed, part of it is silliness on rules. But anyway, we'll get to them. Miller starts out by noting that China is engaged in a large military buildup that will allow them to project their military might around the world. He argues for what is known as a denial defense, denying China the ability to take over or influence Taiwan, but also any Asian ally like Japan. Among those allies are, in fact, Japan, South Korea, and India, besides Taiwan. So defense policy must focus not so much on Russia and Europe, although it does remain a concern, or the Middle East, although it also remains a concern, but China. Specifically, thwarting Chinese plans regarding Taiwan. But the United States, as in Europe and the Middle East, cannot do it alone. Other Asian allies need to aid in that effort, although now we're getting into foreign relations, not really defense concerns. But still, regardless, besides getting NATO members to increase their defense spending in Europe, our Asian allies should also increase spending to thwart the Chinese threat. In fact, a defensive umbrella is suggested that would include the United States, Japan, and Australia in Asia. It might also include India also. And so far, unless you're a Chinese communist lover, there's nothing too controversial here. Turning to NATO, Miller says a reorientation of manpower is required. Namely, if NATO nations fear Russian transgressions, they should field the majority of conventional forces in Europe. The United States, we are the nuclear deterrent against an aggressive Russia. Or maybe even using special operations and surveillance. He further notes that South Korea should take the lead on the Korean Peninsula against its neighbor to the north, with the U.S. again being the nuclear deterrent. Now, it's no secret that Russia has nuclear weapons, although we don't know their quality, and that China is upgrading their nuclear arsenal. Yet our nuclear arsenal remains dated. Miller argues its size and sophistication must at least match or be better than that of both Russia and China. Although none of this is controversial, some of it does smack of reliving the Cold War. And this somewhat funny part, the Democrats seem focused on Russia and Ukraine more than China, while the Republicans are focused on China more than Russia. Now, as we've seen with Russia and Ukraine, their fighting force leaves a lot to be desired. We haven't seen the Chinese military in action, and the policy is a deterrence against it. In effect, we're getting Reagan's peace through strength belief, not against Soviet communism, but against the communism of China. Miller also notes some role for the military in combating terrorism, but at a sustainable cost. That assumes no conventional military intervention in foreign countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, as there was in the past. Instead, since the Middle East is a hotbed of terrorism, partners like Saudi Arabia and Jordan need to take a bigger role. Of course, this guy knows a thing or two about fighting terrorists. Project 2025 also looks at the military procurement process and notes that by the time a new weapon is introduced, is sometimes obsolete. Instead, to meet current needs, weapon system procurement should be fast-tracked and deployed. If all this seems like common sense, it is. It's not controversial. To achieve this, a systematic audit should be conducted to phase out or terminate obsolete programs and products and replace them with effective ones. I mean, wow, this is real controversial. Given our military support to Ukraine in their war with Russia, our stockpiles of weapons have been depleted and they need to be resupplied. We must have adequate inventory for our needs first before we sell or ship off assets to Ukraine. Collaboration between the Defense Department and domestic industry partners to bring the latest, most effective weapons systems online is a must. Miller suggests multi-year procurements and block buys that will streamline the process and decrease overhead costs to the government, as there would be less competition for those procurements. Now, there are loopholes in the current law that allow defense contractors to manufacture certain items overseas. The drawbacks to this are obvious, especially in times of war. Instead, all military equipment should be manufactured domestically or along with staunch allies like Great Britain and Canada. This would spur factory development, create American jobs and Canadian jobs, and make for a more resilient military industrial base. To enhance that resilience, there should be a large base of partners, and an important one is small business. Another important issue with procurement is exportability. Usually that becomes an issue on the back end of the process and must be a consideration in the planning and development stages. The policy argues for a relaxation of some regulations regarding the trafficking of arms. When a law makes it difficult to export weapons to staunch allies like Australia, Great Britain, and Canada, it is a need for some reform. Also, speeding up the contracting timeline is important. It takes 18 months of various reviews to grant a contract. Is it any wonder a wrench then costs $450? And it's not only our military that suffers the consequences. Why would Saudi Arabia purchase a fighter from the United States for $350 million when they can get something that meets their needs from China for $200 million? It doesn't make sense. The fact is that adversaries like China take full advantage of the slow behaviors of the Department of Defense to the detriment of the United States. I've always had the opinion that the United States is really good at producing two things: food, and arms. But lately we've slipped in the area of military arms. Anyway, I'll pick up the second part of Chapter 4, Project 2025, next time, I think on Saturday, which involves manpower and some or Monday or whatever. It involves manpower and some specific arms suggestions. And that's it. Not really all that controversial, right? Anyway, have a great day and a more pleasant tomorrow.